Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report. From Butler to the border, the Biden administration's security failures. I'm John Solomon, the editor-in-chief of Just the News, and tonight, in partnership with the Association for Mature American Citizens, we are going to have a candid conversation about the Biden-Harris administration's record on security. It's an issue that is top of mind for many American voters this election. That's what all the polls show. Ever since the bungled and deadly withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan in 2021, Americans have had strong reservations about this administration's ability to deliver security. Those concerns have only heightened with the dramatic tragedies of the last few weeks, from the wave of murders of innocent Americans like Laken Riley at the hands of illegal aliens to the assassination attempt on President Donald Trump's life, which exposed extraordinary Secret Service failures in Butler, Pennsylvania. Americans feel more vulnerable than ever, and those concerns don't fade with the Democrats' decision to swap out Joe Biden for Vice President Kamala Harris. After all, Kamala Harris was put in charge of the border crisis, and it has only steadily worsened in the time since she took over. Tonight, we're going to zero in on just two of the security crises we face: the border and the assassination attempt. Both involve the same parent agency, Alejandro Mayorkas's Homeland Security Department. And both reveal similar patterns of neglect and incompetence that have put ideology ahead of safety. Now, I'm lucky to be joined once again tonight by AMAC's amazing CEO, Rebecca Weber. Rebecca, it's great to see you again. Thanks for AMAC's sponsorship of this very important conversation. Americans are really concerned about the security of our country, aren't they?
They sure are, John. Thank you so much. It is great to be back with you hosting another monthly special. There is a whirlwind of activity across America, and AMAC members, over 2 million strong, they're on the forefront, engaging at the grassroots level as we're gearing up for this 2024 election. AMAC's goal is to arm our members with the facts and insights necessary to make informed decisions come November. But in light of this pivotal election year, AMAC is really proud, John, to offer all of our listeners an exclusive membership deal. You can get your first year of AMAC membership for just $1. It's a great and very unique opportunity to really strengthen our conservative voice by backing an organization that stands firm on your values. So if you're watching, don't miss out. You can get your first year of AMAC membership for just $1. Visit amac.us/no noise to join our community today and start enjoying a wealth of benefits without compromising your principles. So, John, this is why we're doing this special report. We are here to help secure America's future.
And you guys have been on top of every development in the border security crisis that America has gone through over the last 3 years. It's been amazing. All of your experts have helped us do better reporting on it. So it's really great, Rebecca, to have you on this very special conversation tonight. It's going to be an important one. Just a few hours ago, in the House of Representatives, the House voted to repudiate Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris's stewardship of the border crisis. As you remember, she was named the border czar by President Biden back in 2021. Things have only gotten worse. By the millions and millions of illegal aliens have crossed into this country since she was given that portfolio. Today, the House voted to repudiate and to denounce her stewardship of this very important crisis. One of the members who was there for that vote and has brought to light some of the most damning evidence of the failures at the border is the chairman of the House Oversight National Security Subcommittee, the great Republican congressman for the state of Wisconsin, Congressman Glenn Grothman. Mr. Chairman, good to have you on the show.
Glad to be on the show, and you're absolutely right. When we look at Kamala Harris, the first thing we ought to look at is the border. When her and President Biden took office, President Biden assigned her the job of dealing with the border. And you got to remember, at that time, Kamala had really been rescued from political oblivion, right? She ran for president. She didn't make any ground at all. And but Joe Biden rescued her, made her vice president, and put her in charge of the border. She did nothing. If possible, Kamala Harris is worse at the border than President Biden. And I hope all Americans dread what would happen if she would now become the president of the United States. I mean, she couldn't make it clear that she intended to do nothing, did not view this as a crisis at all, even when we were in a position of getting over 350,000 people a month crossing into this country.
Yeah, that's such a great
Yeah.
point. So the numbers are so devastating. I want to ask one little quick question because one of the things that the president asked her to do very quickly was to work with other nations to try to keep the flow of migrants from reaching our border. It doesn't appear that she struck a single agreement. In fact, they reversed a lot of the Trump era agreements. She's not been able to really get consensus among our allies to help solve this problem, right?
No, because she doesn't care, right? She wouldn't go down to the border. She just doesn't care. And there's an element in this country, it's always been out there, maybe hanging around universities, who don't realize we have a special country here. They wouldn't care if 100 million, 200 million more people would come here. And you can see that because when we were up over 350,000 people coming here a month, she did nothing. And obviously, you've got to communicate, as President Trump did, with Central American countries and Mexico, and say, we've got to cut this off at the spigot right now. So, and the personal tragedies that come, not only the people coming here, the huge number of unaccompanied minor children separated from their parents crossing the southern border, real disaster. And I think as we analyze Kamala Harris, now that we have a new person as the Democrat nominee for president, appears like a new nominee, we start with the border.
Great point.
Exactly right. And Congressman, we see how Kamala Harris is really attempting to distance herself from her resume, essentially trying to erase, her do-nothing role as border czar. Under Biden and Harris's watch, they lost track of 85,000 unaccompanied minors. These children were put up in homes, and they don't know where they are. How does something like this happen?
Right.
And will there be accountability?
It's not caring. Now, that was a New York Times number. The Biden administration says a little bit smaller, but no question, tens of thousands of children without their parents, and you've got an administration that would attack Donald Trump for having kids separated from their parents for just a couple of weeks. And here we have, tens of thousands of kids separated from their parents for years, maybe for a lifetime. We lose track of them. We send them to foster parents who haven't been adequately vetted. No question, humanitarian problem, a huge security problem for our country, permanently changing our country, but obviously a disaster for these children who are all alone.
Yeah.
And speaking of a security problem, Congressman, the Secret Service failed historically on Director Cheadle's watch. And now, while she has resigned, many Americans are really losing hope that the Secret Service will meet its protective mission. What needs to happen to both ensure that this doesn't happen again and also hold those accountable for this historic failure in Butler, Pennsylvania?
You have to have some, I guess I'll call them independent agents in there who you can trust. As I understand it, there were agents that were closer to President Trump who were not there that day. I think you also have to have the head of the Secret Service should be somebody focused on security. And the gal who was in there, sadly, big into DEI, made a point of saying, a priority is going to be get more female agents in there. And as soon as you go down that rabbit hole, it means you're not focusing on the key mission, which is we want the best people on the job and we want them adequately trained. The other thing is she should have especially been on the ball given the inflammatory statements made by even prominent Democrats or prominent liberal journalists. President Biden's going to be a dictator, this sort of thing. President Obama himself or President Biden himself, right, saying hit the bullseye. So when you hear completely unnecessary, horrible language out of prominent Democrat politicians or prominent left-wing media, you have to really heighten security.
Yeah. Sir,
I can never think of another time in my life when you had politicians almost demonizing their opposition, like the Democrats have done to President Trump. And the ironic thing is President Trump's been in there for 4 years, right? We know what we're going to get. Some people won't like it. We're going to get a tax cut, right? We're going to get a stronger economy. We're going to have more drilling for oil. All those things are going to happen. I can understand a lot of left-wingers, they don't want to drill for more oil, but it's not the end of the world. Let's not tell people, we're on the verge of a dictatorship here.
Yeah, That's such a great point. Sir, the Secret Service was moved into the Homeland Security Department, and there's a common theme at the Homeland Security Department on Alejandro Mayorkas' watch. It isn't getting the job done, whether it's the border, whether it's cybersecurity. There's great concerns that have been raised by inspector generals there. And of course, the Secret Service wasn't properly resourced. That's one of the things we're hearing for the Butler event. Can you talk a little bit about the demise of professional culture and capability at Homeland under Mayorkas and the vice president and the president?
Well, right up and down. I think because they don't really care enough about America, whether you're looking at the border, whether you're looking at Secret Service, they do not view their mission apparently as importantly as I hope the average American does, right? And that's the underlying problem. They're probably a little bit anti-police anyway, right? Anti-law enforcement. I remember President Biden spent a great deal of his term in office demonizing the police department. I'm sure that flops over into the Border Patrol, flops over into Secret Service, claims they're racist, this sort of thing. And I think as the result, they don't view it with the importance that it should take on. I mean, we've had several assassination attempts in my lifetime. Obviously, John Kennedy, a successful attempt. People like me will never forget that. A couple of shots at Gerald Ford, shot at Ronald Reagan, and apparently the administration, led by Secretary Mayorkas, does not automatically side with law enforcement, make sure they have to be properly trained, properly compensated. It's just not a priority. And again, it should be predicted because we know right out of the chute, attacking the police as being racist, saying we got to let all these people out of prison. That's where he started. And so this is where we wind up.
Yeah, good point.
Exactly. It seems that major news media is in lockstep with the Bidens, the White House, and Kamala Harris. Jill Biden, the White House press secretary, Kamala Harris, they all reassured the public for months that Biden was sharp, on top of his game, and would not drop out. And then we see Biden drop out. Why does the timing of when Biden chose to step down seem so suspicious to so many American people?
Well, I think they dropped out at a time where the Republicans would have to get their game up to research or educate the public on how bad President Biden's successor was going to be, right? I mean, when you look at it, Kamala Harris was, if not one of the top 2 or 3 most radical Democrat senators. So they replaced Joe Biden, who had a reputation before getting here as being a moderate Democrat who turned into a radical. Now he's being replaced by somebody who's obviously more radical. It takes a while to talk about that. We were talking in the office here about guaranteed income, in which Kamala Harris wants to give every American $2,000 a month. I mean, can you imagine what that would do? We already have a welfare system that's out of control. She wants to give everybody $2,000 a month, which studies will show, of course, means they'll sit at home on their butt. Eventually they'll get up, they'll vote Democrat every couple of years. But, that is what we're getting, and I think that's why they delayed it. It's going to take the Republicans a while
time to educate
the uninformed public.
Mr. Chairman, we're about to hit that commercial break. I apologize so much. Thank you so much for joining us. You're doing great work. You were one of the first to focus on those missing children. Thank you for doing that. Folks, a quick commercial break. While you're doing that, go to amac.us/no noise. Go sign up in the commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report presented by AMAC. From Butler to the border of the Biden administration's major security failures. Joining us right now is somebody that has had an incredible career in law enforcement, from the LA Police Department to being an assistant director in the FBI to rising to being the commissioner of the Customs Border Protection Agency. Joining us right now, former Commissioner Mark Morgan. Mark, great to have you on the show.
John, Rebecca, thanks for having me.
We got a great question coming from Rebecca here.
Yes, Mark, it's great to have you with me, and I would like to jump right in. I want to talk about Kamala Harris. She was the border czar, and an Axios article is trying to rewrite history by claiming that Kamala Harris has never been the border czar, and the terrible situation at the southern border is not her fault. What do you make of that? And will this tactic really of just lying work to their advantage?
Well, it's a good question about lying. I mean, they've done pretty good so far with their campaign of lies for the past 3.5 years. But I do think the American people are starting to wake up. But I think it's important. Let's go back to even before she was anointed as a czar. Remember when she was a senator, Harris, it's when she equated ICE to the KKK. She would later go on and really be a champion of complete dismantling and destroying ICE. And then, of course, she would go on. Remember the CBP, when the horse patrol incident on the border, when they were doing their job to safeguard the border, she said numerous times that she equated that, and it was equivalent to modern day slavery, what we saw. So look, her rhetoric has been consistent throughout her tenure in politics. Her statements have been vile, have been reckless, they've been irresponsible. So her tenure as czar, look, she absolutely owns that part of the chaos and lawlessness of border. For the past 3.5 years, Rebecca, she has doubled down, tripled down on supporting President Biden's open border policies. So she cannot separate herself now from this crisis.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Mark, I went back today when Axios and CNN started this, well, she's not really the border czar mantra. When Joe Biden appointed her, he said this: she speaks for me. She has my authority. That is a remarkable claim, that she really is in charge of Joe Biden's border policy. That's what he bestowed upon her. Do you think the American public understand that when a vice president is given that level of mission and said she speaks for the president, she's got the president's power, that she really is in charge?
John, absolutely. Look, Rebecca, this goes to your point too. I have more trust and faith in American people. They know what czar means, right? And they know that she's failed at that job. And now, as they're trying to rewrite history to say, well, she really wasn't in charge of border security. She was just in charge of the political and diplomatic aspects of trying to figure out their root causes. I think American people call BS on that. They know it's a complete lie. And it's going to be tough for her to be able to come back with a good answer with respect to the total chaos and lawlessness that we've seen for the past 3.5 years. President Trump, he's got a track record on it. I was there. I believe we have the most secure border in our lifetime. And Harris and Biden that came in and they intentionally unsecured the border. I don't think that's lost on the American people. I don't think they're buying it.
Yes, and Kamala Harris has done nothing, and in doing so, she has enabled millions of illegals to enter this country illegally. Many are felons, criminals, drug cartels, human traffickers, and she's essentially inviting people around the world to invade our country. How concerned are you that this may result in a rise of domestic terrorism here at home?
Rebecca, so keep that in mind real quick, what you just said. I couldn't have said it better myself. So with this total chaos and lawlessness that you just described, when she's asked, remember when she was asked if she'd ever been to the border during an interview, she actually cackled and said, well, no, but I haven't been to Europe either. I mean, that's literally where she's at. Meanwhile, not only, and here's what's important, specific with the national security threat. In the past 3.5 months, I just looked at the stats this morning. Border Patrol alone has apprehended 380 illegal aliens on the terror watch list. From FY17 to FY20 under Trump, that total was 14. That's a 380% increase. We've apprehended well over 100,000 what we call special interest aliens that come from countries that we know sponsor, harbor, and facilitate terrorism. The question is if or when the terrorism threat comes to our country, it's already here. And with respect to criminals, look, in that same time period under the Biden administration, Border Patrol has apprehended well over 50,000 criminals, including murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members. That's a 99% increase from FY17 and 20 combined. That's why we cannot sustain this, and that's why the American people have to understand a vote for Harris is going to mean a continuation of the chaos and lawlessness at our borders.
Yeah, so important to remind people. The White House made a big point today of saying, hey, Kamala Harris was the person dealing with all these foreign countries. You did that work. You and the Trump administration, you got the Remain in Mexico policy. You got Mexico to help and other countries to help. Is there any evidence that Kamala Harris made any difference with any foreign allies to slow the actual flow of illegal immigrants to this border?
Zero. John, this is a good question we don't talk enough about. So as they're trying, as Rebecca said, rewrite history, and they're trying, well, she was only in charge of the diplomatic aspect of the root causes. Well, think about this. So their first days in administration, John, as you said, what did they do? They ended the Remain in Mexico program agreement that we had the full cooperation and support of Mexico. They ended the safe third country agreements. We refer to them as the asylum and cooperative agreements we had with all three Northern Triangle countries. Look, President Trump, whether you like him or not, he came from a position of strength and power, and he used that to get these countries to join this as the regional crisis it was. At one point, Mexico had over 20,000 personnel that they had deployed to not only secure and safeguard their southern border, but also increase interior enforcement as well as the shared border between our two countries. On day one, they jettisoned all the leverage we had, and that's a significant reason of why we reverted back to the chaos that we have right now.
Yeah, great point.
You know, it sure feels like we're looking at a kind of full display of the Democrat Party's betrayal of the American people in the last couple of weeks. This is a real peek into how they operate. How would you sum up what we're seeing, and if there really are any lessons here?
Look, one thing that I can say, and I try not to get political, so this is really my response as an American, Rebecca, back to this question, is that, look, they've been accusing and all this rhetoric about how President Trump is a threat to democracy. But isn't what they've just done with Biden stepping out, isn't that actually a little threat to democracy? They're literally doing exactly what they're accusing President Trump of doing. I think it was, around 12 million people voted in the primary. They voted it as, Biden as their guy. And when they figured out that Biden was going to lose and Trump was going to walk into the end zone untouched, they said, hey, look, we can't have that. This isn't about what the American people want. This is about us retaining power. And I think this is absolutely the opposite of what we should be doing under a constitutional republic.
Yeah, so important. Tammany Hall returns to the Democratic Party. Just remarkable. Mark, I want to turn to your other expertise. You had a stellar career in the FBI, rose to the level of assistant director. The Secret Service, we now know from the FBI's testimony in the last 48 hours, the shooter flew a drone over the protected zone of the speaking location just a couple hours before Trump spoke. Numerous warnings that this guy was acting suspiciously. Lots of heads up, lots of behavior heading into this week that normally the Secret Service would pick up through its internet monitoring capabilities. How big a failure, from all your law enforcement experience, how big a failure is the Secret Service's behavior that week leading up to and including the day of President Trump's shooting?
Colossal. I don't think that we've seen a failure like this from a protection, from a VIP protection standpoint in our lifetime. President Reagan is probably the one that comes as close as possible to that, but there's very different reason, different circumstances. But, John, even more than that, clearly it was a colossal failure of that day to protect former President Trump. But I also say it's a failure afterwards in what we refer to as crisis communications. What we saw was, and we continue to see, a failure of those involved, from the AG to the Secretary of Homeland Security to the Director of the FBI and Secret Service. They have not come out and addressed the American people. In my opinion, we should have seen them, within a couple of days, all together, standing on the same podium with the largest gaggle of investigative journalists we've seen in our lifetime, taking all the incoming questions they have to really reassure the American people, not only on what they knew at the time, but reassure them about the process. And this is exactly why, and what we've seen in the past 2 days of these hearings, I think have not produced what the American people need. And there's just the inherent distrust that they have of the Department of Justice. That's why I'm calling for an independent commission to be appointed that's outside the political process, outside this administration, and is comprised of really subject matter experts. I think that's what we need for the American people.
Important. No doubt about it.
It really is. I mean, we saw the body cam footage of the aftermath of the assassination attempt, and it shows how law enforcement, they were discussing how a sniper lost sight of the gunman, Thomas Matthew Crooks. We really do need to hold people accountable. It can't just go away with resignation. Who needs to be held accountable? How can we prevent this from happening again?
Those are the questions, Rebecca. And I think that what we've seen historically in the government, and look, this is painful for me to say, I've been in the federal government for almost 30 years, is oftentimes we do this political process, we do all these internal reviews, but at the end of the day, a couple of things do not happen. One, people are not held accountable, right? There's not a specific action. And then some of the recommendations, they just go ignored, largely ignored, and nothing really substantively changes. And that's why right now we see the typical traditional process play out. You got the FBI involved. You've got DHS-IG involved. You've got the political process. The problem is the American people just have lost confidence in that process. And without that independent commission that I'm recommending, we're not going to get the answers that I think are going to be credible and trustworthy for the American people.
Yeah, Mark, you made up a good point, too. A decade ago, Congress did a big investigation. The Secret Service warned of the very things we're seeing, failure to allocate resources, right, getting distracted. You're right on the money, as always. Great to have you on, sir. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you both.
All right, folks, Rebecca and I will be right back. We got a lot more to go, a lot of good conversations in this very special report. In the meantime, go to amac.us/no noise. You can sign up right now, and you're going to get your first year of AMAC membership for $1. I'm a card-carrying member. You become a card-carrying member and say thank you to AMAC for all it does to support this great country. amac.us/no noise. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report brought to you by AMAC. From Butler to the border, the Biden administration's security failures. We're going to continue to do a deeper dive into the extraordinary events of July 13th, the attempted assassination of President Donald Trump. We know so much more about the shortcomings of the security planning there that day. And Rebecca and I thought it would be a good idea to bring in somebody, well, who used to work in the Secret Service. He knows how it's supposed to work. He's a retired Secret Service officer, Gary Byrne, and author of many great books, including Secrets of the Secret Service. Joining us right now, Gary Byrne. Gary, great to have you on.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We've turned to you many times over the years to try to make sense of something when the Secret Service has a failure. This one feels like one of the biggest. Give us your top line of what you think happened here.
So it's just a complete failure, as you said. It goes back many years. The Secret Service, the one thing it does do right is it protects its name, the Secret Service, and each year it gets bigger and bigger, more management and less workers. What we saw the other day was a culmination of things that I pointed out in 2018 in my book, Secrets of the Secret Service, is the Secret Service is getting to the point where it's going to have another major failure based on the fact that they have incredibly low manpower, and no director ever tells a politician that they can't do something. And they always keep expanding their responsibilities and not their manpower. And they end up treating their employees so bad, John, that they leave in droves. When I left the Secret Service in 2003 to the Air Marshal Service, they lost 300 uniform division officers in less than a year.
Wow. Because
they kept telling them, if you don't like it, leave. And then we had a place to go to. What you saw happen to Donald Trump was an attempted assassination, and it was able to happen because of incompetence, employees that are overworked, and it's clear now that the Secret Service has been robbing resources from the Trump protection detail to support other protection details, the Biden family. And I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. It's never acceptable not to have enough manpower. Congress gives these people billions of dollars a year, and they keep promising they're going to train 100 agents, 100 officers. And traditionally what they end up doing is training a few of those or half, but they always keep the money.
You know, the question I have for you, though, Gary, is, President Trump said that he was given no indication that law enforcement had identified a suspicious person when he took the stage in Pennsylvania. So here he takes the stage, and some of the rally goers said that they saw a gunman on the roof before the president even walked out on stage and had alerted law enforcement. So how does that happen when there are people there and they've got some sort of communication device? Why weren't they listening to the rally goers who were pointing clearly at someone on a roof? How does that happen?
It shouldn't. It's a complete failure. Communications. Well, okay. So let me back up a little bit. So I saw what we all saw on video. People saying, "Oh, look, there he is." It takes time for that information to get there. Part of the problem is, and this will come out later on, a lot of the poststanders that they were using were not Secret Service agents. They were not uniform division officers. They were federal law enforcement from other agencies. from the Marshal Service, from DEA possibly, from the Air Marshals. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they're not trained up to the same speed as a uniformed division officer or as a Secret Service agent. Again, they are so low in manpower that the Secret Service traditionally, if they need 100 people, they send 60. And this is an example that it was a complete failure. And it almost got one of the most popular leaders in our times murdered on national TV. It's unacceptable.
Yeah. No, so well put. So well put. Gary, there's a couple things that haven't added up. At some point, the Secret Service tried to argue because that rope was slightly sloped, they didn't want to put an agent on there. I don't know any Secret Service agent that would have been afraid to get on that roof and protect it. Then they also said they didn't know about the drone. The drone was flying over the site 2 hours before. Some of these things don't add up just in this story that the Secret Service has offered us.
Yeah, so we don't know if anybody else saw the drone, but it's hard. Listen, how is it possible that everybody else saw it and law enforcement didn't? And the idea, the Secret Service is trying to play both sides of the fence here. They're trying to say they're in charge of the security. You know, if you approach the Secret Service detail, you know, when they're securing an area and you say, hey, I want to do this, and they'll say, well, we're in charge of security. Now something's happened and they're trying to push it off on local law enforcement. That's not what the facts are. If there was nobody with that local law enforcement to tell them what to do or to show them where they should be standing, it falls back to the Secret Service because they had not enough real Secret Service agents, not enough uniformed division officers. And the ideal that roof, John, I don't know if you ever got the opportunity to be on the roof of the White House. Yeah. Up until 15 years ago, the roof of the White House was an absolute hazard. Only, maybe 20 years ago, only when they redid the roof did they put up this small catwalks. And the first time I went up there, I was kind of concerned. First of all, there's lightning rods all around the edge of the White House. Right. And my fear was if you slipped and fell, you'd impale yourself. Wow. Counter sniper and the regular uniformed division officers have been sitting on posts up there for 20 years. The roof had nothing to do with it. Exactly. That was the director. That was the first sign that the former director didn't want her job, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
I have another question. A lot of people are talking about, should the Secret Service move back to, under the Treasury Department? Currently, it's under the Department of Homeland Security. What are your thoughts there?
So, yeah, I'm okay with it, but also realize, too, that the things the bad management or bad style that the Secret Service has, we used to describe it as the beatings will continue until morale improves. And their other motto was, that's the way we've always done it. That all started under the Treasury. I don't have a problem with it going back into the Treasury, but the Secret Service needs a giant management realignment. They need to reduce the amount of layers of deputy assistant directors and assistant to the special agent in charge. They need to consolidate it. They need more workers, more worker bees, like these guys you're seeing on these pictures here. They need more young agents. They need more uniformed division officers, and they need to train them up to the level. And they need to have enough manpower. All the training in the world doesn't do any good if you can't do refresher training. And one of the questions I would like somebody from Congress to ask the acting director of the Secret Service is, I want to see the last two pay periods, how many hours each one of these agents and officers have worked in the last two pay periods. They worked them into the ground. And I've said this to somebody the other day, and they said, well, Gary, those are tough jobs, and they know what they're getting into. That's true. That's looking at it from a military standpoint. Oh, when I was deployed here, I was working all the time. That's for a 6-month period, a year period. These guys are 25-year career people. You can't work them 12, 20 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week. It's not physically possible. I was there. I promise you, you will break.
Yeah, no, it does wear your awareness sometimes. It wears it down over time. Gary, there's only two people I know that in the last decade sounded the alarm. You and Jason Chaffetz back in 2015, his investigation. You had this right. This has been a resource question. You called this moment. We're so grateful for all your insights and all you've done, including your great service to your country. Great to have you on tonight.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right, folks, we got a lot more conversation like this ahead, so don't go anywhere. In the meantime, during the commercial break, I have a great idea. Go to amac.us/no noise. There, For this month only, a very special offer that Rebecca's made. You're going to be able to join AMAC for $1. You don't get anything in America for $1 anymore. Go do that. If you're already a member, go give it as a gift. A $1 gift to one of your friends or your relatives. What a great idea. amac.us/no noise. Rebecca and I will be right back. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report brought to you by AMAC. From Butler to the border, the Biden administration's security failures. I'm joined by AMAC CEO Rebecca Weber, and we've been talking about the failures. We've got them pinned down. Now the question is, will the Biden-Harris ticket be able to deflect by swapping out one candidate for the other? Our next guest, well, he's one of the keenest minds I've ever met in the thought leadership space. Great radio host, great author, former candidate for governor in the state of California. He's our good friend, Larry Elder, and he joins us right now. Larry, great to have you on the show.
John, Rebecca, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good to have you.
Thank you, Larry. You know, we see that Biden, he is in a state of continuous mental collapse, and surely Kamala Harris, who has more exposure to Biden than the public does, she's got to see this as well. If Biden is too senile to run for re-election, why isn't he too senile to remain the president through November? In other words, is Kamala Harris covering up, in your view?
You think? Of course, if he's too senile to sit for his documents, classifications, violations, if he's too senile to campaign, of course he's too senile to run for president. But again, let's not focus on senility. Let's focus on mental competence. Thomas Sowell, one of my mentors, was the same age, gave a very long interview about a new book that he wrote, very precise, very on it. Joe Biden, it's about his mental decline. That's what's going on here. And everybody knew it. They covered up for it. Why? Because whatever state Joe Biden is, if he could fog up a mirror come election day, as far as the left is concerned, he's not that Hitler, Trump, threatening democracy, convicted felon figure. So that's all they care about. They care about maintaining power. And then when the debate exposed Biden's mental competence for everybody to see, then they took him out in the boat and whacked him like Fredo.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. They literally went back on their own democracy pledge and got rid of democracy when it was convenient. Larry, I want to talk a little bit about Kamala Harris. She ran for president, couldn't even get 1% of the vote in the Democratic primary. She had a lot of bumpy time when she was Attorney General in California, a lot of concerns about the conduct of her office. And as Vice President, she got the border. That hasn't gone well. When people get to know Kamala Harris for her record, not Joe Biden's record, but her record, what do you think they're going to take away from her?
Well, her ability to win, John, will depend upon the ability of the media/mafia to prevent people from knowing about her record. All the things that we talked about regarding the reason that most people feel we're on the wrong track, inflation, gas prices, 8 million people in the country illegally, crime being up because they want to reimagine the police. She's all of that and on steroids. She wants a national rent control. She wants single payer. She wants illegal aliens to get health care. She wants a guaranteed minimum income. She supported a House bill that would have set up a commission to study reparations. She's a climate change alarmist. You name it, she's that way. She believes rich people, of course, haven't paid enough in taxes. She believes corporations haven't paid enough in taxes. She has an increasing hostility towards Israel and towards Bibi Netanyahu. So if people realize what a left-wing loon she is, a la Gavin Newsom, the more they know, the more they won't like her.
Yeah. Do you think Trump running against Kamala is better or worse for Donald Trump in 2024 compared to Biden?
Yeah, it's worse for Donald Trump in this way. Again, the media are going to transform Kamala into Kamala 2.0. She's going to be a combination of Joan of Arc and Rosa Parks by the time the media gets done with her. And no matter what Donald Trump says, and you know him, he's going to come up with some sort of nickname against Kamala Harris, and he will be called racist and sexist. You're already seeing it. One congressman referred to her as a DEI hire, even though Joe Biden publicly said he wants his vice presidential running mate to be a female. His last 4 contenders on his short list were all black females. But you call her a DEI hire. One Democrat from Florida said anybody that calls her a DEI hire is calling her the equivalent of the N-word. So this is what Donald Trump's going to be facing. He'll be talking about all the policies that are bad for us, why most people feel we're on the wrong track. But he'll also have to deal with the allegations that whatever Donald Trump says, however he says it, however kindly and gently he says it, he'll be called racist and sexist.
Yeah, that is going to be a complication. Byron Donalds the other day suggested, listen, Donald Trump should just stay selling his policies because they're the strong point for his thing and let the attack dogs do it elsewhere, keep that friction away from him. I want to turn to something that Kamala Harris doesn't get credit for, but she may have to own it in the election. No vice president has cast more tie-breaking votes in the Senate than Kamala Harris. I think 33 is what I've counted. One of those was the very first one to pass the very first stimulus package, which all the economists say is what gave us the inflation surge that we suffered. It wasn't temporary, it's been long term. Can the Trump campaign and Republicans paint her as the sort of the flashpoint of all the inflation that's hit our budgets?
Oh, absolutely. Even he had Lawrence Summers, the former Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton, warning that it was going to be inflationary, and they did it anyway. But again, they're going to make some sort of excuse. You're already hearing the attack against people that refer to her as the border czar, because after all, no one ever gave her that title. Now, we've been calling her the border czar for years. Nobody got mad until just now. Now, all of a sudden, it's unfair to call her that.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
I think the Democrat Party really does feel betrayed because they're running a nominee that its voters did not choose. What are your thoughts about them avoiding this democratic process, just installing her without a single vote from the American people? Could that backfire?
That's a good question.
With her own party?
I think most people hate Donald Trump so much, they really don't care about the process. They just want somebody younger, more fit than Joe Biden. They like Joe Biden's policies. They like what he did on so-called reproductive rights, defending Roe v. Wade. They like what he did on student debt relief. So they more or less like his policy. They just want somebody to be able to articulate them better. And that's what they've got in Kamala Harris. They just don't realize that many independents and some moderate, sensible Democrats have no idea how left-wing she is. It's our job to inform them.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. Real quick, we got about 30 seconds left. On Israel, she's going to part ways with Joe Biden. That might be good to keep some of the Arab constituencies of the Democratic Party, but may hurt the Jewish vote, right?
I would think so. The Democrats have an amazing inability to distinguish between arsonist and firefighter. On what happened on October the 7th was the biggest attack against Jews since the Holocaust. Now, all of a sudden, Israel is going too far by trying to eliminate this big threat. It's insane. And Kamala Harris, of course, boycotted or didn't go to the speech that Bibi Netanyahu gave because she was giving a campaign speech at a sorority. Bad priorities.
Yeah.
Say.
Well, you reminded us one thing in your great book, as goes California. California has produced a lot of bad things for this country. Maybe Kamala Harris will be one of them. We'll see how that turns out. Larry, we love all the great work you do, whether it's radio, television, your books, your campaigns. You are a rich blessing to this country. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with one more segment with Rebecca right after these messages. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this special report from Butler to the border, the Biden administration's security failures, brought to you by our good friends at AMAC. I'm joined once again, we got one more block to go here, with AMAC CEO Rebecca Weber. And we've also brought in one of our good friends, the national spokesman for AMAC, Bobby Charles. Great to have both of you here to kind of wrap up what's been a really great discussion, Rebecca. It's been pretty amazing.
It sure has, John. Very excited to be here. Some terrific guests. And Bobby, we're thrilled to have you joining us here. I want to jump right in and really turn to the spectacle of President Biden being pressured to drop out and then Harris suddenly made into a saintly candidate. What does that stunning process without precedent really tell us about Democrat respect for their own voters and the electoral process?
You know, that's an excellent question, Rebecca, because what it really shows is that they have no respect for their own voters. I mean, you have a primary process that took months and years to prepare for, and the average Democrat voter, that might not be me, but the average Democrat voter thought that Biden was their choice, and the party made all kinds of excuses for him. And he gathered virtually all of the delegates. So not in the history of this country has a party, Republican or Democrat or Whig or anything else, put themselves in a position where they essentially vetoed all the voters of their own party and decided that they would effectively oust, almost in a Soviet-style coup, they would oust their presumptive nominee against his will. Put him in a position where he was compromised. Who knows what they told him to get out of there, and then elevate somebody who really was among the least popular, even in their own party. So, you know, I guess this is the way we moved from Brezhnev to Andropov to, the successors that followed Andropov. And it's a pretty horrifying thing to see particularly when you have a party saying that the other party is undemocratic and then turning around and essentially showcasing what undemocratic really looks like.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you see certain constituencies, even within the Democratic Party, not happy what happened. Black Lives Matter, others criticizing this as a coronation. One of the interesting things I've been watching is the way the Biden White House and the media have tried to say, well, this is a fresh reboot. Kamala Harris is a whole different game, but she owns every aspect of this Biden-Harris administration's record. It's going to be hard for them to run from what they just pulled off the last 3.5 years, right?
Yeah, what a great phrase, hard for them to run. You know, to borrow from Ronald Reagan, you can run, but you can't hide from your own policies. You know, honest to goodness, you pick a policy, and Harris was in the room, and there's got to be 18 or 20 of them that I've kind of started to chart out. She was in the room. She was part of the decision-making process. She either dropped the ball entirely or was part of the promotion of things that have damaged, hurt most Americans, from the economy to the border to international policy to Afghanistan to fentanyl. I mean, this administration is the poster child, both of them, for utter failure of respect, of integrity, and of policy. So I don't know if it could get any worse than Harris. Or to put it differently, Biden, to me, and Harris are just flip sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
That is an interesting way to look at it. And she'll try to run from him, but soon, I think, if she does, in fact, get the final nomination. Bobby, the nation avoided an unthinkable tragedy on July 13th when a shooter nearly killed President Trump. I mean, with a little distance from the event, it really seems, you know, now that we're looking back, truly like a miracle, divine intervention. We saw major failures by the Secret Service, yet really no contrition or apologies by Biden or Harris for the nearly catastrophic failure. What does that event and the administration's shocking shrug at their own incompetence tell you and really tell the American people?
Yeah, that's really 2 or 3 questions in one, Rebecca, and they're all excellent. On the first hand, what it tells us is that there's an incompetence, a level of incompetence that's almost incomprehensible. You know, I worked for 2 presidents directly in the Reagan and Bush 41 White Houses, and 3 times a week was over in the Bush 41 White House with Colin Powell. And I'm going to tell you something, the Secret Service were always the top of the top. They were the Delta Force, if you will, of the law enforcement community. They were special operators. They were physically fit, mentally fit, spiritually fit. They could go to the wall and they would prevent anything, anywhere, anytime. This was a total failure of not only the leadership, but right down the chain of command. And of course, things roll downhill, and when you have poor leadership at the top, it keeps going down. So you can look down the chain of command, and you can see that down the chain of command, you had a failure of leadership and a resignation, I think a little bit late, of the head of the Secret Service, who really didn't belong there in the first place. But you can also look up the chain of command at Harris and at Biden and say, look, they're just reflecting failures of leadership at the top. The second big thing you point out is their inability to understand the enormity of what almost happened. We almost lost a former president and a potential future president because of the utter willful incompetence of an administration. And by the way, if it's incompetent in the Secret Service, you can jump across that, the whole Justice Department, the Department of DHS, the leadership at HHS, the leadership at every single department, including defense. There is a lack of competency, a lack of understanding of the enormity of the events that they're facing and their own policies. I mean, to call Afghanistan a success, to call this Secret Service operation somehow a success before they finally backed away from that word, is to misunderstand what risks and threats really are. So I think it demonstrates to us the peril we are in when we have bad leadership. But the third part of your question to me is this absence of contrition, no self-awareness, no understanding that you almost had a president killed here, and no apology to the American people. I mean, ultimately, this administration has betrayed the American people 7 ways from Sunday, and this really just catalyzes that. It puts it in a little teeny crucible and shows you, wow, this is how bad it can really get.
Yeah, it's such a great summary of really what we've talked about this whole show. Lots of security failures and unawareness of just how harmful they were to America. And of course, very little correction. That is the record of the Biden-Harris administration. Bobby, always great to have you. Rebecca, what an honor to host alongside you such an important discussion. Folks, as we wrap up today, go do me a favor. Go to amac.us/no noise. and sign up today. $1 for a whole year membership. I'm a card-carrying member of AMAC. Go join me. Say thank you to AMAC. They make discussions like this happen every day. They make all of us more able to participate in our great constitutional republic. They're one of the most important groups in America. Go join them today. We'll be back tomorrow with regular programming. Until then, God bless you. Have a great evening.